Hi, and welcome to part 4 of our Genealogy Guidepost series, Leave a Lasting Legacy, Storytelling in Family History. My name is Hannah Kubachak, and I'm the Genealogy Reference Librarian for the Waco-McLennan County Library's Genealogy Center. Today I'll be joined by Bill Buckner, who is our Genealogy Center Supervisor. This presentation, we will discuss the importance of writing, explore formats for telling family stories, and examine elements of a well-written family history. We'll also review how to set a goal for writing your family history. This is something that I have heard many times over the years. I am the only one interested in my family history. But this is not a good reason to not write down your family history. Here is a list of 5 family histories that were published on one of my specific family lines. 4 of these were written before I was even born by people who I've never met. But their research and the fact that they took the time to write down their research, cite their sources, and publish that material to ensure that it found its way into as many hands and as many libraries as possible has allowed me to break through brick walls in my research that I never would have been able to do without these individuals who laid the groundwork for that family line. And this is why it's important to take the time to write down your family history and get it into libraries or into the hands of family members, because you never know who will be interested in your family history down the line. It might be one of your direct descendants, but it could also be the descendant of your cousins who also share those same ancestors. And start right now. Your writing will improve with practice, and your research will improve with writing. You've already made research discoveries, so share that information with others. You don't have to wait until your research is complete, because you will always find more information. And what if you find more information after you write this book? Well, that's a great problem to have. Celebrate the new discoveries and write a sequel.
Let's go over some general tips. Identify the reason for wanting to write and write that reason down and revisit during the process. I'd like to say that you would write a letter to your future self to remind yourself of why you got interested in genealogy. We have so many people come into the center, Genealogy Center, with the idea that they want to pass on to their children, to their grandchildren, what they know about their family. Then we get involved in researching and that quest to get back one more generation. And 10 years down the road, we still haven't written anything to pass on to our children. So take the time to write down your goal, write yourself a letter, and keep focused on what you originally wanted to do. Please do not try to write a family history as a surprise for Christmas or some other reason. You need help from your family to fact check, to proofread, and encourage you, especially like when you get to putting together an index. It's a very tedious process, but you want to have family involved and have, say, an index party and help you with your index. And start now. As we've talked about before, you do not have to wait until your research is complete to start writing. Writing is best served by practice. And so by writing everything you find out about your family on a daily basis, how would I say that? What order should I put these facts that I found? And just write out some notes. And as you go along, you'll be able to pull your notes together into something comprehensive. And look at what information has already been published on your family. As Hannah had shown you, there were multiple books with her direct line family involved. And so this is one of the first things you want to do, is to use these wonderful full digital sources like Internet Archive and the Family Search's digital book collection and HaTrust to find family histories that deal with your family that have been written. And you want to look at what gaps are involved, what misinformation might need to be corrected. And so that's one of the first things you should do. So we're going to be looking at types of family history writing. You want to look at what your final product should look like from the beginning. If you just start writing, what format is that going to be put into? There are many, many varieties and sub-varieties out there, and I highly suggest that you find a collection of a genealogy collection of family histories and go through some of these. We're going to give you some examples, but there are many, many more. You can create anything you want. Some things are more simple, some things are more difficult. And ask yourself again, what is that goal that you have in mind as you start your project? So one type of product or final product is just an annotated pedigree chart. We have many in our collection that are just straight out legacy or family tree maker printouts with basic relationship information. Sometimes the sources are listed, sometimes not. In this case, an annotated one would be just some basic notes that you've made, questions you might have had, but to get that on paper and put into a collection so it's there for others to use down the road. The genealogical narrative. This is more the academic style that you see. If you hired a professional, this is what you would expect. Something with a standard numbering system. A numbering system is basically a means by which you formalize who the relationship is to the person before with using Roman numerals and regular Arabic numbers. It will include biographical sketches in some kind of a format so that you can see who is related to who and where they lived and who married who. And it's usually just along the direct ancestral line. Sometimes you inherit family letters or some other kind of documents that you can transcribe. And basically think of it as I'm going to provide a source for future research of our ancestors by publishing these letters. You have to think hard and long about, is it something that you want the world to know about? I know my dad published these letters and thought along those lines very hard. Did he want the world to know about these love letters of my great grandmother? And in time, he decided that yes, it was worth doing that. You can include photos, you can ID the people and places, and put things in timeline order. And basically, it's preserving history. And so, before these letters got destroyed or lost, and it's just a great way to preserve your family. Also, diaries. You come across a lot of times like war diaries, family diaries. We had one in our family. It was my grandmother who started a diary the day she met my grandfather and stopped the diary the day before she married him. And so once again, you can include scans of the original. You want to add footnotes or definitions to help people understand what the person was talking about. So there is some research that goes into these types of documents, but very beneficial. A memoir. This specific memoir, this gentleman listed his whole life, every place he lived, what he did, how many trips he took. He was in the military where he served. Just everything about him as if somebody was interviewing him. What a great treasure to find if you were his direct line ancestor somewhere down the road. Very well done. And so think about that. There's also memoirs in which you've added family history, like you're searching for an ancestor and giving more family details as you go along. So again, once again, just think about visiting a collection as you start your project. whether here in Waco or at the state library or any place else that you find a good collection of genealogy, they'll have family histories, and they come in all shapes and sizes, and they're typically under the call number of 929.2, with subject heading of whatever surname you're looking for, family. And so they're just it's just a great way to find something that you feel comfortable with and you get you excited. And so that's just a great thing to do. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other elements of a well-written family history. You want to include visuals, whether it be ancestor charts to help the reader understand what you're talking about, maybe a family tree, family group sheet, a descendant chart. You think about what visuals would be helpful for someone trying to make sense of your research. That's the basic premise of these visuals. You also want them to be well done. So sometimes you might want to get somebody with that expertise to help you with your graphics. There are some genealogical softwares that help with charts and reports and features of this nature. Maps. And so if maps are important to either the migration of your family, showing where they lived within a city, showing the distance between places, how they traveled from one place to another. There's also these things called fire insurance maps or Sanborn maps that might show where they went to church, where they went to school, and where they went to work. And then again, family photos. What a treasure it would be to find a photo that you are the only member of the family that has this photo and to publish it. You always want to have a high DPI on your photos as best you can and try to identify everyone in the photo. And then also, my big complaint all the time is state where this photo is located. Is it in your personal collection? Has it been donated to a library or an archive? But be descriptive of where it is by place, by name, and time frame. Also, scanning original documents. If you're able, if it's clean enough and it's legible and it's valuable for your story, include those family Bible records, those letters that might be important. It's important that we multiply these kinds of documents out there into the world so that other people can access them, and be sure also to inform where these records are located. And take pictures of places. Place is an important part of our story, and there's lots of different aspects where you can find historic images of houses, through postcards, historic buildings, the church that your ancestor attended, schools, businesses, and landmarks within a community. That helps identify the context of our lives, and it's most important in developing a complete story of our ancestors. And then publishing, think about in terms of, are you going to want to print this, bind it yourself, which there are multiple options to do that nowadays, digitally or not, or find yourself an online publisher that you can upload your work and have it printed and bound, or go through a traditional publisher, someone that has the capability to take your content and format it and develop it into really a nice product. And so think about that when you're looking at indexing, design, layout. If that's not your cup of tea, then you might want to think in terms of the expense versus struggling through all that with your family history.
Writing a book can be a major undertaking, and you can start with small, specific goals along your way to creating a book. So if you've already made some discoveries in your research, but you don't feel it's enough content for a book, or you want to make sure that the story gets out there and you don't necessarily want to wait until you've completed your book, there are some other things that you can do to share family history that are smaller goals that you can start with. For example, you can make a calendar. This is a great way to share family photos. This makes a great gift to give to people in the family, and it allows you to make sure that these photos are scanned and put out into more hands so that more people can appreciate the family history. You can also include scans of newspaper articles or other documents. Make sure that you double check your research and your photo identification. You can find different websites to make these calendars, sites like Mixbook, Shutterfly, Walgreens. There's so many out there. If you do a Google search for custom calendars, you'll find many options. You can upload photos, you can input custom dates. So in this calendar, I included birthdays and anniversaries for my direct ancestors. And then you can include a family tree on the back cover, which I did because several of the family members that I was giving this calendar to, I knew would not necessarily recognize how different people were related. And so including a family tree, if you're giving this as a gift, can help others who are looking at this recognize those relationships. You can also create a scrapbook. Use copies. Do not use your original photos and documents if you're going to be pasting everything into a scrapbook. But this is a great way to create a nice visual of different documents and photos. So if you're a creative person who enjoys putting things together, scrapbooking a specific event or person in your family can be a great way to put that family history together. Make sure that even in a scrapbook, you're still citing your sources. And this can be done as a traditional scrapbook or uploading scans to a photo book service like Mixbook or Shutterfly. Again, there's so many different photo book makers out there. Have nice templates that you can upload these types of documents and images to. You can also create a cookbook. So obviously in a cookbook, you'll want to include recipes, but you can also include photos, images of family dinners or holiday dinners. You can include family stories, and then explain who the recipe came from and what their names are. So for example, this is a family cookbook that was compiled in my family. And that first recipe, Aunt Bertha's Cookies, was submitted by Mimi. I know Mimi is my great grandmother, but other people in the family aren't necessarily going to know who that is. So if you're going to use the family names for one another, make sure you identify somewhere a key of who's who in the family, so that someone not immediate related or someone further down the line is able to recognize how those people relate and why those recipes are significant to the family. You can also submit an article for a genealogical publication. So many genealogy societies have journals or quarterlies, and they are always looking for great content related to genealogy. So this is a great place to include information about your family. You can include research stories. So if you found a really great source for information and broke through a brick wall or found something that you thought was interesting that you think other people should know about, you can include that. You can also submit family photos, abstracted data. So if you find church records and you want to transcribe those for a journal or a quarterly, that is something to consider submitting. Personal family papers or correspondence. Again, family histories. If you write a biographical sketch about one of your ancestors, that's a great thing to submit to a quarterly or a journal. Bible records, like Bill mentioned earlier. If you have family records and you have the only copy that exists, then getting those images scanned and transcribed and submitted to as many places as possible is a great way to make sure that that information is being preserved for future generations. So how do you start? First, as Bill mentioned in the beginning, identify why this project is important to you. You can write a letter to your future self to reference along the way when you're feeling overwhelmed or need that extra motivation. Recognizing why you're doing this project is so important. And then set a goal. Identify who the audience is, what your end product is going to look like. Choose a format. Are you writing a book? Are you writing an article? Are you putting together a cookbook? Choose what format you want your final product to look like and set a scope. How many generations are you going to include? Is it going to be a direct line or every branch of your family? And what type of information is going to be included? Setting the scope will help you know how big or small of a project you're willing and able to start with. And then set yourself a deadline. Are you going to be finished this year? Next year? How long do you think is a reasonable goal for this project? And it's okay to revise your goal as you go along. If you decide, oh, I have set my sights too big, I need to scale back, scale back. If you are off to a great start and you think, oh, actually, I need to include some more people in this, include more people. Here's a few examples of goals. You can start with an immigrant ancestor and document the first 3 generations of descendants born in America. Include biographical sketches for the individuals in my direct line. This is going to be a book. And the audience is going to be descendants of my immigrant ancestors. And I'm going to spend 6 months writing for each generation. Some great things about this goal is you have limited what you're going to achieve. You're not writing about your whole family. You are starting with one person and including those first 3 generations. Something important to keep in mind as you're setting your scope is, are you including living people? It is important in genealogy that we protect the privacy of individuals who are still living. And so setting your scope to only include those earlier generations can be important because you're making sure that you are protecting the privacy of anyone who is still living who would not want their information out there, including things like birth dates, places of birth, or your family members who are still living, can be stepping over that line of what is ethical to include in our genealogy research if we're making it widely available by donating copies to libraries and submitting it to things like quarterlies. Another option would be transcribing a journal kept by a great-grandfather. Include footnotes and clarity to add context about people, places, and events. This would be a book, and it would be interesting to descendants of my great-grandfather. I'm going to spend 2 months transcribing these records and then 6 months adding footnotes. And again, you can update your goals as you go along. Here's some article ideas. Submit a photo of my great-grandmother at Christmas and include her beloved gingerbread recipe. Write about the significance of the recipe in our family. So the format of this would be a photo, a recipe, and a 1-page story. This is something that would be interesting to other genealogists. And I want to submit it by December 1st for the winter issue of the quarterly. So this is a much smaller goal. This isn't something that's going to take me years to complete. It's finding a photo, a recipe, and then writing a 1-page story about my grandmother at Christmas. Or I might say I want to provide a proof argument of how I determine the difference between 2 men of the same name living in the same community. I know we have all encountered these in our research where it seems like every person in a family was given the same name. And so if you have taken the time and made the effort and have finally separated these 2 people and identified who is who, save future researchers that time by writing that proof argument and including the sources for how you are able to determine who is who. And this is great content for an article. If you've ever thought, I wish I would have asked sooner, I should have written more down, no one in my family ever talked about that kind of thing, I never thought to ask, or there is no one left who knows these answers, then it's time that you write down what you have learned through your genealogical research so that future generations don't have to have those same thoughts and don't have to wish they would have asked sooner because you answered the question that they wanted to ask before they knew they wanted to ask it. Write the family history that you wish you had had when you started researching. Here are some strategies to keep in mind as you start on your writing journey. Don't wait. Start right now. As soon as this video is over, write down your reason for wanting to write your family history. Remember that reason as you work towards your goal. Never present a guess as a fact, and always, always, always cite your sources. If you have any questions, we are here to help. You can find us in the Waco Genealogy Center at 5301 Bosque Boulevard, and our phone number is 254-750-5945. Thank you for joining us today.